The afternoon sun in Shinjuku was a merciless thing, bouncing off chrome and glass until the whole world seemed to shimmer with heat. Allure walked with her head down, the worn fabric of her light blue maid's uniform clinging to her skin. The white apron, usually crisp, felt limp and heavy. Her shift at the hotel had been long, and the walk home felt longer. The scent of grilling pork and savory broth from a ramen stall drifted on the air, a cruel temptation that made her stomach clench with a hollow ache. Hunger was a constant, low-grade hum in her life, a reminder of the rent that was due and the emptiness of her cupboards. She was watching the cracks in the pavement, counting them to distract herself, when a car slid to the curb beside her. It was long and black and so polished it looked like a piece of obsidian. A man emerged from the back seat. He was a vision of severe elegance in a charcoal suit so perfectly tailored it seemed sculpted to his frame. As he adjusted the cuff of his shirt, a river of intricate blue and black ink, the scales of a dragon, disappeared beneath the pristine white fabric. He moved with an economy of motion that was almost unnerving, a predator's grace. He walked past a small, expensive-looking cafe without a glance, his posture radiating an absolute, unshakable authority. That was when she saw it. A thick, black leather wallet slipped from the inner pocket of his suit jacket. It fell to the pavement with a soft, final thud unnoticed. The man kept walking, his back ramrod straight, disappearing into the pedestrian flow. Allure froze. For a full 10 seconds, the world seemed to hold its breath. No one else had seen. The wallet lay there, a dark promise on the pale gray concrete. Her heart began to beat a frantic, heavy rhythm against her ribs. She took a hesitant step forward, then another, her eyes scanning the street. Still no one. With a trembling hand, she bent and picked it up. It was heavy. The leather was smooth and cool, expensive. Her fingers fumbled with the clasp, and when she opened it, her breath caught in her throat. Inside was a thick, perfect stack of 10,000 yen notes. More money than she earned in 6 months. More money than she had seen in her entire life in one place. It was rent for the rest of the year. It was food, real food, not just instant noodles and rice. It was a ticket out of the suffocating anxiety that was her daily existence. It was a chance to breathe. The temptation was a physical force, a wave of heat that washed over her, making her dizzy. Who would know? The man was gone. He looked like the kind of man who would not even miss it, a man for whom this amount of money was nothing more than pocket change. It was a mistake. A lucky, life-altering mistake. Her mistake to claim. She clutched the wallet to her chest, her knuckles white. Her mind raced, painting a beautiful picture of relief, of a life without the constant, gnawing fear. But then she saw his back again in her mind's eye, the absolute certainty in his walk, the glimpse of ink at his wrist. She knew, with a cold drop of dread in her stomach, that this was not a man whose mistakes went unanswered. This was not a man you stole from, even accidentally. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her head, a stern warning from a life lived long ago. Some debts you can't ever pay back. The fear was colder and sharper than the temptation. With a curse under her breath, a curse at her own stubborn conscience, she broke into a run. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice thin in the city noise. "Sir, wait." He was about to round a corner when her voice reached him. He stopped, but he didn't turn immediately. It was a deliberate, calculated pause, as if he were assessing the sound, the intent behind it. Then, he pivoted slowly on the heel of his polished shoe. He faced her. The world tilted. Up close, he was even more intimidating. His face was all sharp angles and unforgiving lines, his black hair swept back from a high forehead. But it was his eyes that held her captive. They were dark, almost black, and utterly devoid of emotion. They took her in with a single, sweeping glance, the cheap, worn-out shoes, the simple maid's uniform, the flush on her brown skin from her run, the wallet held out in her trembling hand. "You dropped this," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She extended her arm, offering it to him. He didn't smile. He didn't offer a word of thanks. His gaze was a physical weight, pressing down on her. He stepped forward, closing the small distance between them. The air grew thick, charged with an energy she couldn't name. He took the wallet from her, his fingers brushing against hers. The contact was brief, accidental, but it sent a jolt of pure electricity up her arm. It wasn't warmth. It was something else entirely, something cold and sharp and dangerous. He held the wallet for a moment, his thumb tracing the seam, his eyes never leaving hers. The silence stretched, becoming its own kind of pressure. She felt pinned, a butterfly under glass. She should have just dropped it and run. "What is your name?" he asked. His voice was low, a quiet rumble that cut through the city's hum. It was smooth, but with an edge of gravel, like silk pulled over stone. "Allure," she managed to say. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. "Allure," he repeated, and the way he said it was different. He tasted the syllables, owned them. "You will be rewarded for your honesty." He didn't reach into the wallet to pull out a few notes. He didn't dismiss her. Instead, he gestured with his chin toward the black car that had appeared, ghost-like, at the curb beside them. The back door was already open, an invitation into a dark, silent cavern.
"Get in," he said.
It was not a request. It was not an offer. It was a statement of fact, a command delivered with the calm certainty of a man who had never been disobeyed in his life. A cold dread, far more potent than the fear of stealing, washed over her. She had a choice when she saw the wallet on the ground. She chose honesty. Now, looking into his flat, merciless eyes, she realized she had no choice at all. Saying no was not an option. That path had closed the moment she decided to be a good person. The inside of the car was a world away from the hot, noisy street. The air was cool and smelled of rich leather and something else, a faint, clean scent of cedar and smoke. It was his scent. The door closed with a heavy, final thud, sealing them inside a bubble of absolute silence. The city slid past the tinted windows, a vibrant, soundless film. Allure sat perfectly still on the plush seat, her hands clenched in the lap of her apron, her gaze fixed on them. She did not dare to look at him.
He did not speak.
The silence was a weapon, and he wielded it with surgical precision. It pressed in on her, forcing her to confront the sheer recklessness of her situation. She had willingly gotten into a car with a complete stranger, a man who radiated a quiet lethality that made the hair on her arms stand up. Every survival instinct she possessed was screaming at her to flee. But the doors were locked, and the city was a distant, unreachable dream. They drove for what felt like an eternity, finally pulling into a private underground garage beneath a towering skyscraper of steel and glass. A man in a dark suit, his face impassive, opened her door. Rio, she still didn't know his name, was already out, waiting for her. He led her to a private elevator, the ride up just as silent and suffocating as the car journey. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse that was less a home and more a monument to wealth and power. The floors were black marble, the furniture was stark and modern, and one entire wall was a sheet of glass offering a breathtaking, godlike view of Tokyo. "You will work here now," he said, finally breaking the silence. He stood by the window, looking out at the city that was clearly his domain. "Your previous employment has been terminated. They have been compensated for their loss." Allure's head snapped up.
"What?"
"You can't do that. I have a job." "You had a job," he corrected her, his voice calm. He turned from the window, his dark eyes pinning her in place. "You work for me. You will live here. You will be paid 5 times what your former hotel paid you. You will want for nothing. But you will not leave. A prisoner." He had made her a prisoner in a gilded cage. "Why?" she whispered, the question feeling small and foolish in the vast, empty space. "Because I returned your wallet." A flicker of something, amusement, perhaps, or something colder, passed through his eyes. "Honesty is a rare commodity. It is valuable. I collect valuable things," he paused, his gaze sweeping over her again, lingering for a moment on the pulse beating frantically at the base of her throat. "My name is Rio Ishikawa." The name meant nothing to her, but the way he said it, with a quiet finality, told her it should.
She was his now.
A piece in his collection. The days that followed blurred into a routine of surreal domesticity. She cleaned the immaculate penthouse, a space so large and empty it felt like a museum. She prepared meals she couldn't have afforded to even look at a week ago. And she watched him. Ryo Ishikawa was a creature of intense discipline and profound silence. He would spend hours in his study, a room lined with books and ancient scrolls, conducting business in low, clipped tones over a secure phone line. He moved through his home like a ghost, his presence a constant, low-level hum of tension in the air. He was not cruel. He was simply absent. He provided for her every need with a detached efficiency, but he never spoke to her beyond giving quiet instructions. Yet, she felt his eyes on her constantly. When she was dusting a shelf, she would feel a prickling on the back of her neck and know he was watching from a doorway. When she served him his dinner, his gaze would follow her hands. He noticed everything, said nothing. One night, unable to sleep, she wandered into the silent living area. A sliver of light shone from under the door of his study. Drawn by a curiosity she knew was dangerous, she approached. The door was slightly ajar. Peeking through the crack, she saw him sitting at his large, dark wood desk. He wasn't working. He was staring at a small, silver picture frame. She could not see the photo from her angle, but she could see his face, illuminated by the soft glow of the desk lamp. The cold, impenetrable mask was gone. In its place was a profound and desolate sadness, a raw vulnerability that stole her breath. It was a look of deep, abiding shame. A quiet cough sounded behind her. She spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. An older man, the same one who had opened the car door for her, stood there. His name was Takeda, Ryo's second-in-command. His face was a web of wrinkles, his eyes sharp and intelligent. He looked at the study door, then at her, and a flicker of understanding passed through his expression. He gestured for her to follow him to the kitchen. He poured 2 cups of tea with steady, practiced hands. "The boss values loyalty above all else," Takeda said, his voice a low rasp. "And he never forgives a failure, especially his own." He told her a story in clipped, dispassionate sentences. The woman in the photograph was named Akane. She was the wife of a trusted ally, a man Ryo had considered a brother. Years ago, during a brutal conflict with a rival clan, the Noguchi, Ryo had given his word he would protect her while her husband was away. But the rival leader, a young and ruthless man named Kaido, had found a way through his security. Akane was taken. She was used as leverage. By the time Ryo got to her, it was too late. He had failed in his duty, a debt of blood that could never be repaid. The shame of it had carved him into the man he was today, cold, controlled, and utterly obsessed with preventing any such failure from ever happening again. Allure looked down at her hands, wrapped around the warm teacup. She finally understood. His control over her, this gilded cage, it wasn't about possessing her. It was about protecting her. In his broken, twisted way, he was keeping her safe because he couldn't bear the thought of another failure, another woman lost on his watch. She was a ghost he was trying to save. The knowledge didn't make her feel safer. It made her feel like a target. Kaido, the rival from the story, was still out there, and Takeda's words confirmed her fear. "He knows of you," the old man said, his eyes like chips of flint. "Kaido sees a new woman in the boss's house and thinks he sees a new weakness." The threat became real a week later. Ryo allowed her a supervised trip to a local market, flanked by 2 of his silent, suit-clad soldiers. As she was examining a display of fresh peaches, a black sedan with tinted windows screeched around the corner, its engine roaring as it jumped the curb, heading straight for her. It happened in a blur. One of her guards shoved her violently to the side, sending her sprawling behind a fruit stand. The car swerved at the last second, missing them by inches, and sped off down the street, disappearing into traffic. It was a message, loud and clear. That night, the penthouse felt more like a prison than ever. Fear was a cold, bitter taste in her mouth. As she was tidying the service area, she noticed a door she had never seen unlocked before. It led to a service staircase. It was an exit, an escape. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was her chance. She could run, disappear into the labyrinthine streets of Tokyo, find a way to get home. She could be free. She put her hand on the doorknob, the cool metal a stark reality against her palm. She could walk out and never look back. But she hesitated. She thought of Ryo's face in the lamplight, the raw pain she had witnessed. She thought of his guard shoving her out of the way of that car, taking a risk for her. She thought of the strange, almost imperceptible acts of care, the way a cup of her favorite tea would appear at her side when she looked tired, the way he always made sure she ate before he did. It wasn't kindness, not really. It was the careful maintenance of a valuable object. But it was more consideration than she had received from anyone in a long time. She pulled her hand back from the door, as if it were burned. With a deep, shuddering breath, she turned away from her only chance at freedom and walked back into the heart of the cage. She didn't make it far down the hall before she saw him. Ryo was standing there in the shadows, watching her. He must have seen her at the door. He must have known what she was contemplating. He didn't look angry. He simply looked watchful. He stepped out of the shadows, his presence filling the hallway. He stopped a few feet from her, his gaze so intense it felt like a physical touch. The silence between them was a living thing, crackling with unspoken questions and terrifying answers. She expected him to yell, to punish her for her near betrayal. Instead, he slowly raised his hand. He reached toward her face and she flinched, expecting a blow. But his touch never came. His fingers hovered in the air just beside her cheek, a breath away from her skin. With infinite gentleness, he tucked a stray curl that had escaped her braid back behind her ear. His knuckles brushed her temple, a whisper of contact that sent a tremor through her entire body. "They will not touch you again," he said, his voice a low, dangerous promise. He was not comforting her. He was making a vow. And in the dark, silent hallway of her prison, it felt terrifyingly like a kind of care. The incident at the market ignited a war. Ryo moved against Kaido's operations with the precision of a surgeon and the ruthlessness of a god. The quiet tension in the penthouse sharpened into a constant, thrumming state of alert. Ryo's men were everywhere, their presence a constant reminder of the invisible siege they were under. One evening, Ryo held a meeting at a high-end, traditional restaurant in Ginza. Allure was required to attend, dressed in a simple, elegant black dress he had provided. Her role was to be silent, to serve tea, to be a beautiful, placid object in the corner of the room. As she poured the fragrant green tea into small, delicate cups, the air crackled with the animosity between Ryo and his lieutenants and the men from a smaller, allied family. Then, the world exploded. The shoji screens that made up the outer wall of the room disintegrated into a spray of wood and paper as a hail of bullets ripped through them. The screams of other patrons in the restaurant were drowned out by the roar of gunfire. In the instant before chaos fully descended, Allure saw Ryo moving. He was not diving for cover, he was lunging toward her. His body slammed into hers, shielding her as he pushed her down behind the heavy, overturned wooden table. The scent of him, cedar and smoke and the sharp, metallic tang of adrenaline, filled her senses. Above them, the fight was a symphony of violence. Ryo moved with a lethal, fluid grace, a dark blur in the flashing chaos. He was not just a boss, he was a warrior. A bullet grazed his upper arm, tearing through the fine fabric of his suit jacket and the white shirt beneath. A dark line of red blossomed on the sleeve. He didn't even seem to register the hit, his focus absolute as he disarmed one attacker and disabled another. The sight of his blood, shed to protect her, struck something deep within Allure. It was a terrifying, unwelcome bond, sealed in violence. Through the splintered legs of the table, she saw Takeda, Ryo's loyal man, grappling with one of Kaido's soldiers. The soldier was younger, stronger, and he got the upper hand, slamming Takeda's head against the floor and raising a pistol to his temple. There was no time. No one else saw. Without thinking, Allure acted. Her hand shot out, grabbing the heavy, cast-iron teapot she had just been using. It was still half full and scalding hot. With a cry of pure, desperate rage, she scrambled out from behind the table and swung it with all her might, smashing it against the side of the attacker's head. There was a sickening crack. The man crumpled to the ground, stunned and momentarily unconscious. Takeda stared at her, his eyes wide with shock, before quickly, efficiently, ending the threat. The gunfire stopped. A ringing silence descended, thick with the smell of cordite and blood. Rio stood in the center of the ruined room, a king surveying his battlefield. His eyes found hers. He looked at the shattered teapot on the floor, at the fallen man beside her, and then at her. He didn't look shocked or angry. He looked at her as if he were seeing her for the first time. In his dark, unreadable eyes, she saw a flicker of something she had never seen before: respect. In that moment, she had crossed an invisible line. She was no longer just the maid.
She was part of this.
Later that night, back in the silent fortress of the penthouse, the adrenaline had drained away, leaving her hands trembling uncontrollably. She stood on the balcony, the cool night air balm on her hot skin, the sprawling galaxy of Tokyo's lights spread out below her. She felt like she was on a different planet from the woman who had walked these streets just weeks ago. "You should be afraid," a quiet voice said from behind her. "Rio." He stepped out onto the balcony, his injured arm now bandaged beneath a fresh shirt. He stood beside her, not looking at the view, but at her. She didn't turn away. She met his gaze, her own reflection a ghostly image in his dark eyes. "I am," she admitted, and her voice was surprisingly steady. "I'm terrified," she took a breath. "But not of you." It was the truth, the most profound and dangerous truth she had ever spoken. The admission hung in the air between them, more intimate than any touch, more binding than any vow. He took a single step closer, closing the space until she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "You are a complication, Allure," he murmured, his voice a low vibration that seemed to travel straight through her bones. His eyes, however, said something else. They said she was a disruption to his cold, orderly world. They said she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. And they said, in a way that made her heart ache, that she was the first thing that had made him feel in a very long time. The war, however, was not over. Kaido, enraged by his failed attack and the loss of his men, became obsessed. He could not get to Rio directly. So, he decided to tear away the one thing Rio seemed determined to protect. He dug into Allure's past, into the simple, anonymous life she had left behind. Her phone, a simple burner model Rio had given her, buzzed on the nightstand. She never got messages. With a sense of foreboding, she looked at the screen. It was an unknown number. A single image. Her blood ran cold. It was a picture of Maya, her best friend from the hotel, her only friend in this entire country. Maya was on her knees, crying, her face pale with terror. A hand was tangled in her hair, pulling her head back, and the glint of a knife blade was pressed against the soft skin of her throat. Beneath the image was a short, brutal line of text. An abandoned warehouse in the Odaiba district. Midnight. Come alone or she dies.